I never told anyone, not even my family, that I earned $35,000 a month. He always believed I lived a simple and modest life, and I never suspected that would be a problem. It wasn't until he invited me to meet his wife's family that I decided to give it a try. I dressed modestly, like a woman of little means. What happened that night revealed more than I had ever imagined. The words, looks, and attitudes of those who should have welcomed me with open arms revealed the true nature of my new family. But the most beautiful moment was when I pulled my platinum card from my bag and revealed who I truly was. The look on my bride's face was priceless. My name is Vivian, I'm 60 years old, and I have a life that few people know about. I would dream as the CEO of a multinational company. I've been earning about $35,000 a month for over 15 years. I have investments, stocks, a substantial bank account, and could easily live in a mansion, drive luxury cars, and wear expensive jewelry. But I chose a different path. I've lived in the same two-bedroom apartment for nearly 20 years. I drive a standard car that's 8 years old. I wear simple store-bought clothes. Not because I needed to save, not at all, but because I've learned that true value lies not in the things we display but in the peace we carry. My son Liam, now 34, grew up thinking his mother was a modestly paid administrative employee. I never corrected that impression. I wanted him to value hard work, dedication, and the value of every honestly earned penny. I wanted him to forge his own path without relying on my bank account. And it worked. Liam graduated with a scholarship, built his career, and 2 years ago married Sienna, who seemed sweet and kind. I say seemed because I was never sure. Something in his polite smiles made me uneasy, as if there was a layer of deceit I couldn't break through. Then came the call that would change everything. Mom, Sienna's family is in Mexico City, and they want to meet you. We've arranged dinner at the Cloister for Saturday. At the Cloister, one of the city's most expensive restaurants, a single appetizer costs more than most people earn in a day. Do they know anything about me? I asked. There was a brief but pregnant silence. I told them I worked in an office, that I was simple. The word simple sounded like an apology, almost an expression of shame, as if I were a problem that needed explaining. A voice inside me winced. Okay, Liam. I'll be there. After I hung up, I looked around my apartment. Comfortable, clean but not fancy. No expensive paintings on the walls, no designer furniture, no luxury items. It was the kind of place someone living on my salary shouldn't be living. An idea began to form in my mind. A dangerous idea, a little cruel perhaps, but irresistible. If they were hoping to meet a simple woman, that's exactly what I would give them. I would go all the way. I wanted to see how they would treat someone they considered beneath their social standing. On Saturday, instead of choosing one of my simple, high-quality clothes, I went to the back closet. There I kept the old, faded clothes I kept for simple errands. I chose a shapeless, stained gray dress. The plain dresses that wouldn't come off no matter how many times I washed them. I wore worn, unpolished shoes. My hair was pulled back into a sloppy ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, not even a watch. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked like someone life had beaten, invisible, forgettable. It was exactly what I wanted. I grabbed my oldest, faded canvas bag and put a simple credit card in it to keep the number. But hidden in a hidden compartment was my platinum card. A small security measure for emergencies, with a virtually unlimited credit limit, which I used for business expenses. The taxi dropped me off in front of the monastery at precisely 7 p.m. A smiling valet opened the door with a smile, gently touching my clothes. It was already starting there. I entered the lobby, illuminated by crystal chandeliers. Elegant people chatted softly, champagne glasses sparkling in the golden light. Then I saw Liam standing. Next to him at a table in the back was Sienna, dazzling in a green dress, jewels sparkling around her neck and wrists, and sitting at the table were his parents, presumably. I walked slowly toward them, watching the other customers stare at me, some with curiosity, some with undisguised contempt. In the corporate world, it was essential to be able to understand people that I was already used to reading. As I got closer, I saw Liam's face change. His eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. Sienna's smile faltered when she saw me. "Mom, you're here," Liam said in a tight voice. She hugged me tightly. "Of course I'm here, darling. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sienna leaned in and kissed my face quickly. It's so nice you could come, Vivian. She introduced me to her family. Dad, Mom, this is Vivian, Liam's mom, Douglas and Elaine Alcantara. The real estate entrepreneur Liam had previously said. Liam was a socialite and involved with charitable organizations, the kind that organize charity galas whose entrance fee exceeds the monthly salary of most employees. Douglas, he extended his hand slightly and briefly. Elaine, he just nodded, his eyes scanning my clothes, my bag, my hair. His assessment was complete in 3 seconds. His decision was clear on his tightly pressed lips. Please sit down, he said, gesturing to the chair farthest from him. I sat down and examined the table. Silverware, crystal glasses, linen napkins, a centerpiece arrangement of fresh orchids. Everything was perfect. Everything was affordable. The waiter arrived with elaborate menus. I opened mine and pretended to struggle to understand. It's all in French, I said, deliberately vague. Elaine, Douglas, would you like me to order? That would be very kind, I said, lowering my gaze. Elaine, he called the waiter and ordered for me. Just a plain salad to start and the meat for the main course, he said. Then he finished, lowering his voice, but not quite enough. The cheapest item on the menu. Liam looked away, obviously uncomfortable. Sienna studied her own menu with unnecessary intensity. And so began one of the most revealing nights of my life. Wine was served, Douglas an expensive Burgundy wine that Elaine always mentions. $250 a bottle, but worth every penny. He raised his glass in toast. To my family, he said, and to new friendships. The hesitation before the word friendships was subtle but deliberate. It was already clear I wasn't considered part of the family. I was an intruder, an anomaly to be tolerated. The first conversation was predictable. Superficial questions about my life, my job, my apartment. I answered everything with half-truths, playing the role of a struggling lower-middle-class working woman. So you work as an administrative assistant? Elaine asked, as he carefully cut into his steak. Yes, years ago, I replied, at the same company. Fascinating, he said without the slightest interest. And you enjoy it? It's a job. Pays the bills. Of course, he muttered as if speaking to a child. The honor of the job is what counts, no matter what. Douglas, and you live alone in that apartment Liam mentioned. Yes, in the same place for almost 20 years. What stability, she commented, choosing her words carefully. So many people these days are always chasing the next biggest and best thing. There's a meaning to satisfaction. The disdain was palpable. They were praising me for being able to stay put, for not venturing beyond my assumed status. I opened mine and pretended to struggle to understand. It's all in French, I said, deliberately vague. Elaine, Douglas, would you like me to order? That would be very kind, I said, lowering my gaze. Elaine, he called the waiter and ordered for me. Just a plain salad to start and the meat for the main course, he said. Then he finished, lowering his voice, but not quite enough. The cheapest item on the menu. Liam looked away, obviously uncomfortable. Sienna studied her own menu with unnecessary intensity. And so began one of the most revealing nights of my life. Wine was served, Douglas an expensive Burgundy wine that Elaine always mentions. $250 a bottle, but worth every penny. He raised his glass in toast. To my family, he said, and to new friendships. The hesitation before the word friendships was subtle but deliberate. It was already clear I wasn't considered part of the family. I was an intruder, an anomaly to be tolerated. The first conversation was predictable. Superficial questions about my life, my job, my apartment. I answered everything with half-truths, playing the role of a struggling lower-middle-class working woman. So you work as an administrative assistant? Elaine asked, as he carefully cut into his steak. Yes, years ago, I replied, at the same company. Fascinating, he said without the slightest interest. And you enjoy it? It's a job. Pays the bills. Of course, he muttered as if speaking to a child. The honor of the job is what counts, no matter what. Douglas, and you live alone in that apartment Liam mentioned. Yes, in the same place for almost 20 years. What stability, she commented, choosing her words carefully. So many people these days are always chasing the next biggest and best thing. There's a meaning to satisfaction. The disdain was palpable. They were praising me for being able to stay put, for not venturing beyond my assumed status. Married to our Sienna, with a promising career, living in such a nice apartment. The meaning was clear. How did it feel to know my son had risen in life? He had surpassed my status, as if I must have been simultaneously grateful and terrified. I'm proud of him, I replied sincerely. He worked hard. Yes, he worked hard, Douglas repeated. But having the right connections and being in the right circles is also important. Luckily, Sienna was able to introduce him to some influential people. Liam shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sienna smiled and placed her hand on Liam's. My dad helped Liam get that contract with the Aztec Group, she said proudly. It was just an introduction, Douglas replied with a false modesty. The rest was his fault. I didn't know that. Apparently, my son was getting more help from his new family than he'd let on. The waiter brought the desserts. Everyone else had their elaborate creations of chocolate and exotic fruit. A plain vanilla tart was placed in front of me. I chose something light for you, Elaine explained. I know most people aren't used to such rich desserts. At that moment I realized he was actively trying to belittle me. This wasn't just condescension. It was deliberate cruelty. That's very thoughtful of you, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Elaine, as I ate the dessert, she started talking about the future. Liam and Sienna are thinking about having children soon, she announced. We're so excited to be grandparents. It's wonderful, I replied, looking at my son who looked surprised by this. Apparently, this wasn't the young couple's decision but Elaine's. Of course, we'll make sure they have everything they need, he continued. We're already thinking about getting them on the waiting list for the Montalban Institute. It's never too early to get the best education. Instituto Monte Alban, the city's most expensive and exclusive school, is where 6-year-olds learn formal dining etiquette. What about you, Vivian? He asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What are your plans for the future? Keep working, I guess, I replied. I can't retire yet. Elaine's smile widened like a hunter who has finally cornered his prey. Let me tell you this, he said, putting his fork aside and placing his hands on the table. Douglas, we were talking and we were worried about you. The atmosphere at the table changed immediately. Douglas sat up as if they were about to start a business meeting. Liam looked at Sienna in surprise. Sienna looked away and looked at the napkin in her lap. She knew what was coming. Are you worried about me? I asked innocently. Yes, Elaine continued, her voice taking on a false maternal tone. You see, Vivian, we all get older. Life gets harder. And we understand that your financial situation may not be so comfortable. Douglas, she nodded solemnly. The cost of living is rising. Healthcare, housing, everything is getting more expensive. And as someone with limited resources, we're worried this could become a burden for Liam and Sienna in the future, Elaine concluded. So that was it. The true purpose of dinner was beginning to reveal itself. A burden, I repeated softly. Liam is a good son, Elaine explained, as if he were talking to a child. He feels responsible to you. And while that's admirable, Douglas, and I don't want this to get in the way of the life he and Sienna have built together. Mom, please. Liam interrupted, clearly uncomfortable. It's okay, darling, Elaine replied. Your mother understands that we all have her best interests at heart. I remained silent and allowed them to explain their intentions fully. What we want to suggest, Douglas continued. A deal that would benefit everyone. What kind of deal? I asked. Modest financial support, he said, as if he were offering a great favor. We can provide you with a small monthly allowance, Vivian. Something that will supplement your income and allow you to meet your needs without resorting to Liam. Elaine, he smiled broadly. We were thinking about $500 a month. It's not much for us, but we think it would make a significant difference for you. I almost had to stop laughing. $500. It's the kind of money I'd spend on a company dinner without a second thought. And in return, I asked, because there's always something in return. Elaine, his smile faded slightly. Well, not exactly an exchange, more of a mutual understanding. What kind of understanding? Douglas, we only expect you to respect the young couple's privacy and understand that they are building their own lives, with their own traditions and social circles. The message was clear. They wanted to pay me to disappear so as not to embarrass my son and his wife with my inappropriate presence in their elegant life. In other words, I turned slowly. You want me to keep my distance. Elaine, no, that's not the point. We just want everyone to find their rightful place in this new family dynamic. My rightful place, I repeated. Absolutely, she cried, as if finally grasping a complex concept. Of course, you'll always be Liam's mother. But now that you're married to Sienna, now that you're in our circle, there are certain expectations, certain standards. Liam finally found his voice. Dad, Mum, there's no need for that. Mum's never been a problem. Of course not, dear, Elaine said. Nobody says that. We're just trying to be practical and forward-thinking. The waiter came over to ask if we wanted coffee. Douglas, he bought espressos for everyone without consulting me. This small gesture summed up the entire evening. My preferences, my opinions, my desires were unimportant. While waiting for the coffee, Elaine, he continued to explain how this arrangement would work, how they could secretly transfer the money into my account, how I could improve my quality of life, perhaps by better clothes. He glanced meaningfully at my worn-out dress and even made small improvements to my apartment. Of course, we'll continue to invite you on special occasions, he added generously. Birthdays, maybe Christmas. The coffee arrived, and I took a sip of the bitter espresso and placed the cup back on the saucer with a gentle clink. It was decision time. I could continue this charade. I could humbly thank them for their generosity, accept their extravagant bribes, and leave. This way I could observe how this arrangement would work, see how far their manipulation would go, or I could end the drama right now. I looked at my son. His expression was a mixture of shame, confusion, and discomfort. He was caught between two worlds. Respect for his mother and a desire to please his new family. I looked at Sienna. She avoided my gaze, focused on stirring the coffee for which she hadn't asked for sugar. Douglas, so sure of his superiority, so sure of his right to reorganize the lives of others to suit his own interests, and Elaine I looked at. The decision was made. 0 a month, I said thoughtfully. That's an interesting offer. Elaine, he smiled triumphantly. Look at that. I'm curious, I continued. How did you arrive at that specific figure? Is it based on some kind of cost of living calculation? Douglas, he seemed a little uncomfortable with the question. A figure we consider appropriate and generous. Actually, I understand, I replied. So how much did you give Liam and Sienna for a down payment on their house? If I'm not mistaken, the property in that apartment was around $1 million, right? Elaine, I'm sorry, Elaine blinked, surprised by the change of subject. Well, we gave them $50,000. Wedding gifts. $50,000, I repeated. And their honeymoon in Greece. I read somewhere that luxury packages to Santorini cost around $15,000. Actually, $20,000, Elaine corrected. Unable to hide his pride. We wanted them to have the best. So, in total, you invested almost $10,000 in the young couple. Douglas, he frowned. We don't see this as an investment. There are children. Of course, I agreed. It's just an interesting choice of words. You're investing in your children and trying to get rid of that weird mother for $500 a month. A heavy silence fell over the table. Elaine's smile disappeared completely. Douglas's jaw was clenched, his knuckles white around his wine glass. Sienna looked close to tears. And Liam said, my son looked like he was in complete shock. Vivian, Elaine said. Finally, her voice was colder now. I think you're misinterpreting our intentions. We're just trying to help. Help, I repeated softly. It's interesting how that word can mean so many different things depending on who uses it. I put my napkin on the table and leaned back in my chair. My posture shifted slightly. I wasn't the shy, submissive woman I'd played all evening. Now my shoulders were straight, my chin slightly lifted, my eyes fixed directly on theirs. Let me tell you a story. I began speaking in a calm but firm voice about a woman you thought you knew but didn't. Elaine Eve Douglas. They spoke with confused looks. Liam watched me intently. That woman had started working as a secretary for a multinational corporation 30 years ago. She earned minimum wage. She lived in a rented room. She ate whatever she could with what little money she had left after paying the bills. And then she discovered she was pregnant. Liam leaned forward slightly. I knew part of the story but maybe not the details. The child's father had disappeared. Her family had turned their backs on her. She was completely alone. Elaine, she looked uncomfortable for a moment, as if she hadn't expected such personal details. She worked until the last day of her pregnancy. She returned 2 weeks after giving birth. She worked 12, sometimes 14, hours a day. A neighbor looked after the baby while she was away. She studied on weekends. Night classes, certifications, languages she learned at public libraries. All this while raising a child alone. I paused, took a sip of water. That woman had risen in the company from secretary to administrative assistant, assistant to coordinator, coordinator to manager, manager to director, director to vice president. Douglas. Elaine's eyes narrowed. She blinked a few times, as if trying to understand where I was going with this story. So, Elaine, do you know how much that woman makes now? Douglas. They didn't answer. Excluding annual bonuses, participation in company profits, and stock options, the average is $35,000 a month. Liam dropped his fork, and it hit the porcelain with a loud, metallic thud. Sienna paled. That's about $400,000 a year. Over the past 15 years, excluding investments, most of that money has gone to more than $5 million. Elaine. He opened and closed his mouth several times, unable to make a sound. Mum, Liam began, his voice almost a whisper. What are you saying? I smiled gently at him. Darling, your mum is Douglas, and Elaine, he's not what you think he is. You make $35,000 a month? He asked incredulously. Almost 15 years, I confirmed. Before that, it was a little less, maybe 20,000. Douglas found her voice. That's ridiculous. If you'd won it all, you wouldn't live in that apartment. You wouldn't dress like that. No, I don't dress like that. I finished, gesturing to my old dress. Ah, but that's just for today. Let's call it a little social experiment. I wanted to see how they treat someone they consider inferior. Elaine's, her face went pale. Are you saying I'm acting like I'm poor tonight? Yes, exactly. I opened my old canvas bag. From the inside compartment, I pulled out not the simple credit card I'd shown you earlier, but a matte black card with my name engraved in silver. Vivian Mendez, Executive Vice President. Elaine. I put it on the table in front of Elaine. As for your generous offer of $500 a month to get out of my son's life, I think I'll decline. The silence that followed was absolute. Elaine. Douglas looked at the card as if it were a poisonous snake. His jaw was tense, his knuckles white around his wine glass. Sienna looked close to tears, and my son Liam looked completely shocked. Why? He finally asked. Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at him with honey because I wanted you to grow up valuing people for who they are, not what they have. I wanted you to forge your own path, not rely on your mother's fortune. I wanted you to understand the value of hard work, perseverance, and humility. But all those years you made me think I was just another administrative worker. Yes, and look at you now. Graduated with honors, building your own career. If I had handed it all to you on a silver platter, none of this would have happened. Douglas. He cleared his throat, calming down a bit. Yes, this is certainly surprising, but it doesn't change the fact that we're trying to do what's best for our children. The best, I repeated, is to give charity to keep the annoying mother away, and to decide when and how she can see her own child. That's the best you can imagine, Douglas. Elaine interjected, his voice was trembling now. You deliberately deceived us. You came here with this ruse to make us look like that. To make it seem like I interrupted you. Snob, prejudiced, manipulative. I didn't make you out to be anything, I just gave them a chance to show you who they really were. The waiter approached cautiously. Anything else, gentlemen? Yes, I replied before anyone could speak. The bill, please. When the waiter left, I turned my attention back to the table. Everyone was in varying stages of shock and horror. You know what the saddest part of all this is? I asked. My voice was softer now. Do you people really believe a person's worth is directly related to their bank account? You measure respect in dollars, honor in possessions, love in expensive gifts. That's not fair, Douglas protested. You don't know us. No, I replied. No, you don't know us, Elaine insisted. You set that trap to make us look like the bad guys. A trap. I asked calmly. All I did was show up in civilian clothes. You took care of the rest. You offered me the worst meal on the menu. You talked about your luxuries in hopes of scaring me. You offered me money to disappear from my son's life. The waiter returned with the check on a small silver platter. Douglas, he reached for it, but I was quicker. Let me, I said, and took the check. It was for almost $1,000. Without blinking, I placed my black card on the tray. No need, Douglas said. Consider this my contribution to this educational evening, I replied. After all, I've learned a lot about all of you. As the waiter walked away with my card, I turned to my son. Liam, I'm so sorry I never told you the truth, but understand that I didn't do it to deceive you, but out of love. I wanted you to be the man you are today. Hardworking, responsible, independent. Liam nodded, still trying to process it all. All those years, the small apartment, the simple clothes, the modest holidays, it was all a choice. I accepted everything. I didn't need a big house just for myself. I didn't need designer clothes to feel fulfilled. I didn't need to flaunt my wealth to be valuable. Elaine, he let out a dry, bitter laugh. How appropriate. You act like some kind of saint of modesty when in fact you've only deceived your own son for decades. I looked at him calmly. The difference between us, Elaine. You use your money to control people. So I used my common sense to set them free. The waiter returned with my card and receipt. I signed and left a generous tip. Despite the deal they offered, I kept my card. Let me make a counteroffer. Tell me a single time you treated someone without means with genuine respect, and I'll give you $10,000 right now. Douglas, he turned red with anger. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I thought so, I said softly. I stood and picked up my old bag. Liam, when you're ready to talk, you know where to find me. I'll always be here for you. No strings attached, no agreements, no manipulation, only true love. Sienna finally spoke. Her voice was almost inaudible. Vivian, I didn't know about the money, I didn't know about tonight. Believe me, I didn't know. I looked at her, trying to grasp her sincerity. There was shame in her eyes, but also surprise, as if I were seeing her family in a new light. I hope that's true, Sienna, I replied. I hope this evening has been educational for you too. I turned to leave. Then I stopped and turned back one last time. Oh, Douglas. Elaine, you were right about one thing. Money is important, but not in the way you think. The true value of money lies in the freedom it provides. The freedom to live according to your values, to not be controlled by others, to help without expecting recognition. It's a shame that, despite all your wealth, you're still so poor. Nevertheless, I walked toward the elegant restaurant with my head held high and felt the gazes following me. They were no longer looks of disdain for my simple attire, but of curiosity for the woman who had just paid a $1,000 bill and left with the dignity of a queen. Reaching the sidewalk, I breathed deeply in the night air. For the first time in years, I felt completely open and completely free. The taxi dropped me off in front of my apartment building an hour later. I paid the fare and entered the simple but well-kept lobby. The night attendant, Mr. Harris, he greeted me as usual. Good evening, Harris Vivian. Is the lady okay? I'm fine, Mr. Harris. It was a very revealing evening. He smiled, not understanding the true meaning behind my words, and returned to his magazine. I rode the antique elevator up 4 floors to my apartment. The moment I closed the door, I felt the weight of the night settle on my shoulders. I took off my worn shoes, set my gym bag on the floor, and walked to my room. I opened the closet, pushing aside the simple clothes I wore daily, revealing a secret compartment beneath. There were my business suits, my impeccably cut suits, my silk dresses, and my custom-made Italian shoes. A splendor unknown to anyone but my colleagues. I took off the worn-out dress I worn out for dinner and tossed it into the laundry basket. I took a long hot bath, letting the water wash away the tension that had built up inside me. Then I changed into my soft cotton pajamas, a small luxury I'd allowed myself, and made a cup of chamomile tea. I sat in my modest living room looking around. The furniture was comfortable but not luxurious. A medium-sized television, not the latest model. No expensive art on the walls, just a few framed photographs. Most of them were from Liam's childhood, and a few of my rare from my travels. There was nothing here that evoked a woman earning $35,000 a month. And that was the great irony. I actually loved the simplicity. It wasn't completely absurd. Growing up with nothing, having fought for every penny, I learned to value peace over luxury, tranquility over ostentation. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Liam. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, son." "Mom." His voice sounded strange, a mix of confusion, pain, and admiration. "I don't even know where to begin." "I understand," I replied softly. "It was a busy night for all of us." "Why, Mom? Why didn't you tell me?" Literally the million-dollar question. "There wasn't much to tell at first," I explained. "When you were little, I was still building my career. I started making really good money when you were 16 or 17. Back then, while we already had a rhythm, a lifestyle, it seemed unnecessary to change anything. But then, when I graduated, when I started working, when I got married, why did I keep it a secret?" I took a sip of tea, gathering my thoughts. I admitted maybe I was being selfish, but I was afraid our relationship would change if you found out. You would see me differently, and I also wanted to make sure your mother was following her own path, not relying on luck. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "So what happened tonight? Did you plan the whole thing?" I replied. "Not exactly. When she invited me over and told me she'd told Sienna's family I was ordinary, something inside me rebelled. I decided to test how they'd treat me if they thought they had nothing to offer me. No status, no connections, no money. And they failed the test," Liam said, his voice now thick with pain. "Yes, I just accepted. They failed." More silence. "Sienna is devastated," he said finally. "She's embarrassed by her family's behavior and her own." "What about you?" I asked gently. "How are you?" Liam sighed deeply. "Honestly, I don't know. I'm shocked, confused, angry, impressed, all at once. As if the woman I'd thought my whole life was my mother was only half the story. I'm the same person, Liam, just with a different bank account than you imagine. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? A completely secret life. Vice president of a multinational corporation, executive meetings, business trips, decisions affecting thousands of people. A side of you I never knew." She was right. 4 years, I'd carefully kept my two worlds separate. Vivian, the manager, stayed in the office. Vivian, the unassuming mother, came home. "You're right," I admitted. It was a bigger separation than it should have been. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice suddenly tired. "That's up to you, son. You and Sienna." As for his family, they stormed out of the restaurant. Liam interrupted. "Douglas, he said that you deliberately humiliated them. Elaine, she was crying in the car, telling me you set her up." I almost smiled at the irony. It's interesting how humiliated they must be to be treated the way they treat everyone else. "They said they'd reevaluate the support they've given us," Liam continued. "Whatever that means. Financial blackmail. I've translated their favorite control strategy." "Maybe," Liam agreed. "But honestly, Mom, after tonight, I'm not sure I want to be as dependent on them as I was before." Something in her tone warned me. "Liam, don't make any drastic decisions now." In the heat of the moment, Elaine said, "V. Douglas, Sienna's family. Even after what they've done, what they've said, they will always be a part of her life in some way." "Yes," I replied firmly. "Families are complicated. People are complicated. No one is completely good or bad. Maybe, just maybe, tonight would be a starting point for honest conversations, for setting healthy boundaries." A voice sounded on the other end of the phone. Sienna was saying something quietly. "Mom," Liam said. "Sienna wants to talk to you. Do you mind?" "Of course not." There was silence as the phone was held out. "Vivian." Sienna's voice was hoarse, as if she'd been crying for hours. "Hello, Sienna. I don't even know where to begin. I'm so ashamed, so embarrassed." "You don't have to be," I replied softly. "You're not responsible for your family's behavior." "But I let it happen," she insisted. "I saw how they treated you and I didn't say anything. In fact, I participated in it in some way." She was right, but there was no need to rub salt in the wound. "You grew up in that environment, Sienna. It's hard to question the values we were raised with." He sighed slightly. "That's not an excuse. I should have known better." "Yes," I agreed gently. "But it's not what you did tonight, it's what you do next." "I want to improve," he said, his voice firmer now. "I want to be the kind of person who judges others by their character, Not their bank account, someone like you. I closed my eyes, still moved by his words. So start now, he suggested. Not with big words or promises, but with small, everyday actions. The way you treat the waiter, the doorman, the taxi driver, the way you talk to people who have less than you, the assumptions you make about people's worth. I will, he promised. And Vivian, I am truly sorry, more than I can express. I know I am Sienna, and this is a beginning. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a strange state of uncertainty. The truth was clear, but the consequences were still unfolding. Slowly, like ripples spreading after a stone hits water. Liam called me daily, asking about my career, my finances, and the decisions I'd made over the years. It was as if he were trying to reconstruct his mother's image, to fill in the gaps he thought were now there. During one such conversation, he asked, "Why did you stay in this apartment? Could you have easily bought a penthouse downtown?" I could, I agreed. But this place has always been enough. Comfortable, safe, close to the park where I like to walk. Why would I change just because I can? But cheap vacation trips, cheap restaurants, department store clothes. I smiled even though I knew he couldn't see me on the phone. The trips went to places I wanted to see. The restaurants served the food I liked. The clothes dressed me up enough. The point is, Liam, at some point in my life I realized that spending more didn't necessarily mean living better. There was a silence on the other end. I guess I never looked at things that way, he admitted. I always thought that if I had more money, I would naturally spend it on good things, on everything. That's what we've been conditioned to believe. I explained that success meant consumption, that self-worth was tied to possessions. Sienna and I were talking differently, more cautiously. 3 days after dinner, she came to visit me alone and brought flowers. Simple daisies, I noticed, not the expensive roses or exotic orchids her family would likely have chosen. We sat on my small balcony and drank tea, hers and mine. "It's truly beautiful here," she commented, looking around. "It's cozy." "Thank you," I replied. "This is my sanctuary." She hesitated, turning the glass over in her hand. "Vivian, there's something I need to ask you, and I ask you to always be brutally honest with me. What do you really think of me? Not as a bride, but as a person." The question caught me off guard. I thought for a moment before answering. "I see someone in the middle of a journey," I said finally. "Someone who was raised with certain values and is now beginning to question them. Someone who has the potential to be so much more than the boundaries her parents set for her." Tears welled up in her eyes. For so long I lived to impress my parents, to be the perfect girl they displayed like a trophy, the right school, the right friends, the right interests. "What about Liam?" I asked gently. He smiled, wiped away a tear. "Liam was my first rebellion. My parents expected me to marry the son of a club friend, someone from our circle. When I met Liam, I saw something different. Someone genuine, unpretentious. Someone who valued me for who I was. Not for my last name or my bank account." "But you let your parents help him," I said. "Douglas, the contract with the down payment on the house, the honeymoon." Sienna lowered her gaze, embarrassed. "I know how it sounds, but you need to understand. It's hard to say no when this is your family's currency. When financial assistance is the only option. They know the nature of love. They know how to express themselves." I nodded, understanding more than she realized. Money replacing emotional connection. Expensive gifts replacing true vulnerability. And now, I asked, since that night at the restaurant? "My parents are furious," she replied with a sigh. "My dad cut off our monthly allowance, something Liam didn't even know we were getting. It was deposited directly into my account. How do you feel about that?" I was actually relieved, she admitted, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. That money always came with unspoken expectations, invisible strings. I smiled, genuinely touched by her self-awareness. "You know what's funny?" she continued. "Now that I know you, your story, I'm almost ashamed of my struggles. I mean, you raised a child alone and built an incredible career, all without complaining, without expecting recognition. Don't compare journeys," I advised. "Everyone has their own challenges, their own mountains to climb." Sienna nodded thoughtfully. "Vivian, can I ask you another question?" "Of course. How do you do it? Living so wholeheartedly, not caring what others think." I laughed softly. "Oh yes, I do. We all do in some way. The difference was that I'd learned to care more about what certain people thought, people whose values I respected, and less about what the rest of the world thought. We talked for over 2 hours that afternoon. Sienna hugged me as she left. It wasn't a formal hug like the one before, but a genuine, warm one. "Thank you for not judging me for the worst moment of my life," she whispered. "We all deserve the chance to move beyond our mistakes," I replied and hugged her. A week later, I received an unexpected text from Elaine. "We need to talk, just the two of us. Maybe tomorrow at 11 a.m. at the cafe of the Grand Hotel Ciudad de Mexico." He surprised me. The Grand Hotel Ciudad de Mexico was one of the most elegant cafes in the city, Elaine's domain, not mine. I considered refusing for a moment, but my curiosity got the better of me. "I'll be there," I replied. The next day I dressed carefully, wearing neither my flashy business attire nor the simple clothes I wore every day. I opted for something in between. Well-cut trousers, a simple silk blouse, quality leather shoes. Elegant without being flashy. The cafe at the Grand Hotel Ciudad de Mexico was exactly what I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers, soft classical music, formal dressed waiters. Elaine, he was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. As I approached, he looked up, and for a moment, I saw something in his face I never expected. Uncertainty. "Vivian," he greeted. I sat down in the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming, Elaine," I replied and sat down. I admit I was surprised by the invitation. A waiter appeared immediately. "Elaine," she ordered tea Earl Grey. I ordered an espresso. When the waiter left, Elaine, he straightened his napkin in his lap. The movement betrayed his nervousness. "I suppose you're wondering why I asked for this meeting," he began. The thought crossed my mind. "Elaine," he took a deep breath. "For the last 2 weeks I've been thinking about that night at the restaurant. The things I said, the assumptions I made." I stayed silent and let him continue. "I won't pretend it was a pleasant experience," he continued. "Being exposed like that in front of our son-in-law, our daughter, was humiliating. No more so than being treated like an inferior for an entire dinner." I watched calmly. Elaine had the decency to look embarrassed. "Yes, that's exactly what I want to talk about. Our orders have arrived." Elaine, she took a small sip of her tea before continuing. "Do you think you know me, Vivian? You think I'm some superficial socialite obsessed with status and money? Am I not?" I asked blankly. She smiled mirthlessly. "It's more complicated than that." "It usually is. Elaine, I grew up in a family where appearances were everything. My father was a nouveau riche determined to be accepted into high society. My mother was obsessed with status, the right address, the right schools, the right connections. That explained some things, but it didn't justify her behavior. I was raised to believe that social value and personal value were the same thing." "Well," he continued, "respect was tied to a bank account, friendships were strategic alliances, marriages were a joining of assets. And didn't you ever question those values?" "Occasionally," he admitted. There were moments, doubts, but then I looked around and saw that the world confirmed exactly what I'd been taught. People who treated the rich with respect, who opened doors, who made exceptions. I took a sip of espresso and watched her intently. "Why are you telling me these things, Elaine? Are you seeking forgiveness?" He shook his head. "No, not exactly. I'm trying to understand." "What am I trying to understand? How can someone like you, with as much money as I do, maybe even more, live so differently without needing everyone to know, without using it as a weapon, without turning it into his identity?" I hadn't expected this vulnerability from him. For a moment I saw past the polished facade, the underlying insecurity, the carefully concealed vulnerability. "The answer is simple, Elaine," I finally replied. "I learned at an early age that money is a tool, not a measure. Value. It buys comfort, security, certain freedoms, but not true respect, true connection, peace of mind." "Elaine." He studied me for a long moment, as if seeing something new, something he'd never considered before. "You know," he said finally, "that night, after the initial anger, the shame, when I discovered who you really were, I felt something strange, something I couldn't immediately identify." "And what was it?" "Jealousy," he admitted, the word seeming difficult to pronounce. "Not of your money or your position, of course, but of your freedom, your complete disregard for the judgment of others." I almost laughed. If you knew how many nights I lay awake wondering if I'd done the right thing by hiding my finances from Liam. How many times I questioned my choices, my motives. Freedom comes with practice, I replied. And usually only after I realized that the alternative, living to impress others, was far more limiting. Elaine, he played thoughtfully with his teaspoon. Since that night, Douglas, I've had a few arguments, some quite heated. Liam and Sienna think we should cut ties with them until they come to their senses. What about you? I don't want to lose my daughter, he said softly. And for the first time I realized that I've lost her in part a long time ago, perhaps without even realizing it. There was a genuine pain in his voice that surprised me. It's not too late, Elaine said. I said gently. Sienna is still here, still her daughter, but she's been very different since that night. She's confronting us in a way she's never done before. She's questioning our values, our attitudes. Yesterday she refused the credit card we'd always kept. She said she and Liam preferred to live within their means. I couldn't help but smile a little. It must have been a shock. It was unsettling, Elaine admitted. As if someone had rewritten the rules without telling you. I took the last sip of my espresso. These aren't new rules, Elaine. Values older than money. Independence. Self-confidence, honesty. Elaine, she was silent for a moment, taking my words in. You must think I'm a terrible person, she said finally. I didn't actually answer honestly. I think you're a product of your environment like the rest of us. The difference is that some of us are forced by circumstances to question that conditioning. Others never need it unless something forces them to, she finished with a slight smile. Ironic, like a simple mother suddenly revealing herself to be a senior executive with a black credit card. Absolutely. Elaine, she leaned forward slightly. Vivian, I'll be direct. I'm not here just for philosophical musings, though I enjoyed our conversation more than I expected. I'm here because I want to find a way forward to rebuild my relationship with Sienna and by extension Liam. And do you think I can help with that? You have significant influence over them now, she observed, without rancor in her voice. They clearly respect her and her perspective. Elaine, I have no intention of intervening between you and your daughter. That wouldn't be healthy for anyone involved. She looked disappointed for a moment. The only thing I can offer, I continued, is advice. Listen to Sienna. Really listen without planning your reaction, without trying to control the outcome. Ask her what she needs from you as a mother. Not as a financial provider, not as a social architect, but as a mother. Elaine, he digested my words silently. What about Douglas? He's less open to change. Douglas, she has to forge her own path, I replied. You can share your opinions, your new perspectives, but you can't force her to change. Elaine, despite my objections, he paid the bill. As we left the hotel, he hesitated before saying goodbye. Vivian, is there anything else I'd like to ask you? Yes. Do you believe it? Do you believe you could forgive me for treating you the way I did that night? The question caught me off guard. I thought for a moment before answering. Forgiveness isn't something that's granted once and for all, Elaine. This is a process. It begins with acceptance, continues with genuine regret, and is reinforced by real change. He nodded slowly. I understand, but I'm ready to follow this path. If you are, I added. We parted with a handshake that wasn't warm, but no longer hostile. A start. The following week, Liam invited me to dinner at his house. A simple dinner, he assured me. Just him, Sienna, and me. When I arrived, I noticed small changes. Some of the ornate furniture was gone, replaced by simpler, more functional pieces. The walls, once decorated with expensive abstract art, were now lined with personal photos and a few modest watercolors. We're redecorating, Sienna explained, noticing my gaze. We realized that most of our possessions weren't actually for personal enjoyment, but for the sake of impressing others. Dinner was surprisingly simple. A home-cooked meal we both prepared, served on shared plates, not the fine china I knew they had. Throughout the meal we talked about everything and nothing. Work, the news, childhood memories. Without the tension of confidentiality between us, the conversation had never been more intense. It flowed with a naturalness we hadn't experienced before. After dinner, while Sienna made coffee, Liam took me out onto the balcony. The night was warm with a light breeze and a starry sky. Mom, he said, leaning against the porch. There's something I need to tell you. His tone alarmed me. What happened, son? Douglas, I turned down a promotion at Dr. S company. I looked at him in surprise. A promotion that would make you a regional manager. That very promotion, he agreed. Actually, I did more than that. I tendered my resignation. Liam, I shouted. That job was important to you. He smiled, looking oddly pleased with his decision. It was important to me when I believed it was something I had earned through my own efforts. But after that night, after the events that came to light, Douglas, I realized I would never have gotten to that position without your influence. Yet I left it all behind. I didn't leave everything behind, he explained. Actually, I have a new, lower-paying job with a lower starting salary, but at a company where no one knows who my father-in-law is or whether I'll get a promotion based on my work alone. I looked at my son with newfound admiration. The courage this decision required was no small feat. How did Sienna react? I asked. She was the first to support me, he replied, pride in his voice. She said she preferred to live in a smaller, less luxurious apartment, knowing we were building something for ourselves. My heart swelled. Perhaps Sienna had learned more from that enlightening night than I had anticipated. And her family. Liam winced. Douglas, of course. He thinks I'm being ungrateful. That I've missed an opportunity that others would have loved to have. Elaine's trying. He invited us to lunch on Sunday, just the four of us, in his usual low-key way. That's surprising, Elaine commented. Thinking back to our last conversation with Elaine, did you have anything to do with this? Liam asked, understanding as always. I smiled slightly. Let's say, Elaine, I had an enlightening talk, but if change is happening, it's because of him. Sienna went out onto the balcony, carrying coffee in plain ceramic cups. They probably weren't the fine china her parents had given her. Speaking of my mother, she asked, handing them to us. Yes, I admitted. Liam told me about Sunday lunch. Sienna nodded, sitting down next to Liam. He called almost every day. It was strange. For the first time, he seemed to actually listen to me. He wasn't trying to convince me of anything, telling me what to do, how to dress, or where to go. People can change, I observed, if they have enough motivation. And sometimes, Liam added, taking my hand, it takes a small earthquake to shake the foundations and allow that change to happen. We were silent for a moment, savoring the evening, the coffee, and the new honesty between us. Mom, Liam said finally, there's something else I wanted to ask you. Yes, why did you do that? It's a game like pretending to be poor when you go to dinner with Sienna's family. For a while I thought for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I think it was a combination of things, I answered honestly. Part of it was impulse, a reaction to that simple word you used on the phone, as if I were something that needed to be explained, justified. Liam lowered his eyes in shame. I'm so sorry about that. There's no need, I assured him. But another part was protective. Maybe he wanted to see who these people, now a part of his life, really were. How would they treat someone they considered beneath them? And they failed the test, Sienna commented bitterly, simply stating a fact. They failed, I conceded, but sometimes our failures are our greatest teachers. Sienna smiled slightly. I think we all learned something that night. When I went home that night, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The burden of decades of secrecy had been lifted. And while the process had been painful, the end result seemed worth it. The following Monday, something unexpected happened. When I arrived at the office, my assistant, Douglas, he said Alcantara, insisted on being at the reception. He was surprised to see me and I motioned for him to come in. Douglas, impeccably dressed as always, but without his usual arrogance, appeared in my living room. There was something different about him, a hesitation, a vulnerability he had never shown before. Vivian, he greeted formally. I'm grateful you saw me unannounced, Douglas, I replied, gesturing to the chair in front of my desk. What can I do for you? The executive sat down, momentarily impressed by my office. Spacious, overlooking the city, decorated with a simple yet undeniable elegance. Impressive, he commented, looking around. It was different from what he'd expected. And what did I expect? I don't know, he admitted. Something more ostentatious. Perhaps I imagined you'd reveal your true status here, once you discovered who you really were. I smiled slightly. This is my workspace, Douglas. It's designed to be functional, professional and comfortable. Not a statement of status. He nodded slowly, as if absorbing a new idea. I suppose you didn't come all the way here to discuss my decor, I said. No, he agreed, straightening his stance. I came for 2 reasons. First, to apologize for my behavior at that dinner. It was unforgivable. This admission surprised me. Douglas, he didn't seem like a man accustomed to apologizing. Second, he hesitated, obviously uncomfortable. I need your help, or rather your advice. My advice, I repeated, genuinely surprised. Liam left the company, he said, a slight bitterness in his voice. You probably already know that. Yes, he told me. What you might not know is that he wasn't the only one. 3 other executives resigned that same week, all citing philosophical differences with the company's management. Interesting. It seems Douglas's management style was hurting more than just his family. So how can I help this? I asked. Douglas, he smoothed his perfectly combed hair with his hands. The gesture was surprisingly human. You've built an impressive career. You've risen to the occasion. And you lead people who not only fear you but openly respect you. I want to understand how. That was it. Douglas, the real estate mogul, accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed without question. Alcantara was facing the consequences of his leadership style. Leadership. Power isn't the issue, Douglas. What matters, I said calmly, is influence. And true influence comes from mutual respect, not fear or intimidation. He looked at me as if I spoke a different language. So how do you maintain control without threats, manipulation, or using money as a tool of pressure? I stepped into his shoes and began to see his employees as whole people, not just resources to be exploited. In the months following that enlightening night, I observed transformations I could never have foreseen. Douglas, to my surprise, she started coming to my office semi-regularly. Our initially tense and formal conversations gradually evolved into frank discussions about leadership, business ethics, and eventually personal values. I never thought I'd be asking someone I knew for advice under the circumstances of meeting you, she said. I confessed during one of our conversations. Life has a funny sense of humor, I replied with a slight smile. Elaine, he had changed too, albeit in more subtle ways. His attempts to reconnect with Sienna were clumsy, occasionally falling back into old habits of control and judgment, but there was an undeniable sincerity in his efforts. About 4 months after the dinner party we all called it, I was invited to lunch at the Alcantara's house on a Sunday. Not knowing what to expect, I accepted with some hesitation. To my surprise, the lunch was not in the formal dining room but on the sunny back balcony. The table was elegantly set, but it lacked the ostentation I had come to expect from that house. Elaine, she served the food herself, a homemade meal that she admitted with shy pride that she had prepared with Sienna's help. When I commented on the food, Elaine, were rediscovering old family traditions, she explained. My grandmother used to make this dish. I'd completely forgotten about it and never brought it up until Sienna asked about the family recipes. Over lunch, Douglas, I noticed how Liam addressed him, not with the same condescension he had before, but with genuine interest in his new job, his ideas, and his future plans. There was no veiled mention of returning to the company, no suggestion that I had made a mistake. After dessert, the men chatted about a new community project Liam was involved in, and Elaine, she invited me for a walk in the garden. You know, she said, as we walked among the pruned rose bushes. I never really thanked her. Why? For that night, for showing us who we really were. That hadn't been my intention, I admitted. I was more concerned with protecting myself, with figuring out who my son was associating with. Still, she insisted that this was a necessary awakening. Painful, shameful, but necessary. I watched her carefully. Her hair was impeccably combed. The jewelry simple but expensive, the dress elegant. From the outside, Elaine, she still looked like the same polished socialite, but there was something different in her eyes, a new thoughtful quality that hadn't been there before. What was it like for you? I asked. That whole reevaluation process. Elaine, he laughed softly. It was terrible. First, I was so angry at you, at Sienna, at the world. I felt betrayed, exposed, humiliated. I understand that. But then something strange started happening. I started noticing things. The way I treated people below me, waiters, maids, chauffeurs. How I automatically judged people by their appearance, the cars they drove, the neighborhoods they lived in. He stopped in front of a particularly beautiful rose and gently touched its petals. I began to wonder when I became that person, had I always been this way, or had I unconsciously developed it over time? So what was your conclusion? I asked gently. He said both were true. I grew up in an environment where appearances were paramount, but I also made thousands of small daily choices that reinforced those values, placing status above substance in an effort to impress, to overconnect. His honesty impressed me. Changing is hard, he admitted. Old habits, old thoughts automatically resurface. S job is even harder than mine, but we are trying for ourselves in Siena. On the way home, Elaine, she stopped and looked at me with genuine curiosity. Vivian, can I ask you a very personal question? You can try, I replied with a slight smile. You never wanted to boast about your success, especially considering where you came from, and how much you struggled. You never wanted to show the world what you'd achieved. It was a fair question, one I'd thought about many times over the years. Of course I did, I answered honestly. Especially in the beginning, all I wanted was to buy the most expensive house in town, the fanciest car, the nicest clothes, to prove to everyone, and maybe even to myself, that I had succeeded. What was stopping her? I thought for a moment, searching for the real answer. Not just the easy one. I think it was a combination of things. Part of it was financial pragmatism. Growing up poor taught me the value of saving, investing, planning for the future. Part of it was remembering who I was before money, the awareness that this person still had value regardless of the bank account. Elaine, he nodded slowly. Liam, did you ever really want to give him a privileged life? All the opportunities money could buy. That was the hardest part, I admitted. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was depriving my son of advantages I could easily have provided. If my desire to teach him certain values had somehow harmed him. What convinced him otherwise? To see what kind of man he was, I replied simply. Hardworking, kind, down to earth. Someone who valued people for their character, not their status. Elaine, he smiled, glancing out at the balcony where Liam and Sienna were chatting animatedly. You did a wonderful job with her, he said, a slight note of jealousy in his voice. And you have a wonderful daughter, I replied sincerely. Someone who could admit her flaws, who could grow, who could be more than herself. Conditioning. As we joined the others on the balcony, I felt a strange sense of wholeness. We weren't a perfect family. On the contrary, wounds were still healing, patterns were being forgotten, and new paths were hesitantly opening. But there was also an authenticity that hadn't been there before. A desire to see and be seen without the masks of status, pretensions, and social expectations. A year later, I received news I'd never imagined. Liam and Sienna were expecting a baby. I was going to be a grandmother. When they told me, over an intimate dinner at my apartment, I felt a joy far beyond any professional achievement or financial gain. We know it's too early to decide, Sienna said, taking Liam's hand. But if it's a girl, we want to name her after you, Vivian. Tears welled up in my eyes. It would be an honor, and we want you to be an important part of his life, Liam added. No secrets this time. I smiled through my tears. No secrets. That night after they left, I stood on my little balcony and watched the city lights. I thought about that extraordinary day, which began with that fateful dinner when I decided to test my son's family. How different things would have been if I had just shown up for myself, if I had revealed my true financial situation from the start. Maybe Douglas and Elaine, they treated me with superficial respect. Maybe we'd maintain the facade of family harmony, give expensive gifts on birthdays, attend social events, and smile for photos while hiding our true feelings. But we'd also miss out on the growth, the self-discovery, the genuine connection that came with that raw moment of truth. Sometimes, I think, it takes a little theater to reveal your deepest truth. As I was getting ready for bed, I passed the closet where I kept my pristine work clothes. Next to them, still hanging, was the old gray dress I'd worn that night. I kept it not as a reminder of the humiliation I'd endured, but as a reminder of the courage to show the world your true self, whether adorned in expensive silk or faded cotton. I'd learned that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in who we are day to day, in the choices we make daily, in the people we love, in who we challenge, in who we encourage to be better. because my grandson Liam was growing up in a world so different from the one I'd raised him in. I hoped I could teach him the same lesson I'd learned a lifetime ago. Our worth is never in our bank accounts, but in the content of our character. True wealth isn't something you display, but something you live quietly, steadily, and wholeheartedly. With that comforting thought, I fell asleep not as a successful executive, not as a wealthy woman, but simply as Viviano, a woman who had finally found the peace of being exactly who she was, without apologies, without disguise, without secrets. Was it when I revealed my true identity in the restaurant? Sienna, was it when family tried to keep me away from my own son? Or maybe it was the transformation the family went through after the truth came out. Oh, and don't forget to sign up to access the exclusive videos I didn't post here. See you there. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a comment below where you watch this video. We love to hear how far our stories go.